Then we have two questions I took from Lyle S. Henretti. He says, biggest influence? It's a great question. My biggest influence, I think, without question, was P.J. O'Rourke. After I got out of college and after I got out of my second spin at college, I kind of went back in 1992 and 93 to Gainesville to do a sketch comedy show down there, which I had a lot of fun doing. But I was back in the theater department surrounded by all these big liberals, and I didn't know anything or think about anything. I just didn't care about politics. And I started reading P.J. O'Rourke, and I had read P.J. O'Rourke when he was the editor of the National Lampoon magazine. He did a couple of articles I thought were very funny. And P.J. came out, and I read everything that P.J. wrote because P.J. O'Rourke made conservatism actually cool. And this is the challenge. If you're going to win elections, you have to make it cool. You can't just make it smart, and you can't just make it right. You have to make it cool. And we're terrible at this, some of us. You got to make it cool. And P.J. O'Rourke made it cool. He made it cool in terms of how he wrote it, but his attitude was cool. And by the way, I pretty much owe, not verbatim, but those of you who heard me say that conflict of visions, we're a nation of steely-eyed missile men with our eyes on a far horizon. We like fast cars, hot women, loud guns. That's P.J. O'Rourke in a nutshell. I don't know if he ever used that exact phrase. If I had, I would have credited it or changed it. But that's what P.J. O'Rourke did for me. He said basically conservatives are the people that like fast cars, hot women, and loud guns. How hard is it to like these things? You're a weenie if you don't like a fast car, and you're a weenie if you're like one of these feminized men, and you're a weenie if guns frighten you. You're just a weenie, and to go at it there, I thought was so interesting. It went right to the heart of me. It was hysterically funny in many places, but insightful and deep. And I'll tell you something else about P.J. O'Rourke that really, really helped convert me was every now and then you'd get P.J. O'Rourke's sense of incredible guilt and remorse and atonement for the fact that he wasn't just a liberal. He was a bomb-throwing radical in Baltimore. He was part of a collective and published a newspaper for the collective and, wanted to bring down the United States through any means necessary. And there's the opening of one of his books. I forget which one it is, but he talks about. I think he's in the airport or something, and there are some soldiers coming back from Vietnam, and either he gets into an altercation with one of them or something, but some guy punches him. I think it's been a while back, but it basically said, he said, I dodged the draft basically, which meant that somebody had to go in my place, and I don't know who it was that hit me, but if it was the guy that had to go in my place, I wish it was you. In other words, what he's basically saying is I deserve to get punched in the face for everything I believed and everything I did. I deserved it. And I can connect to that. I was never that. I was always pro-American, pro-business, and pro-military. Never had a day in my life I wasn't those things. But I was a lot more liberal. And every time I go to the Reagan Library, I stand there and look at Ronald Reagan and just, at the tomb by myself and just kind of bow my head and apologize and ask for forgiveness and tell him I'm going to continue to do my best to make up for being such an idiot. So PJ he's just the biggest influence on me. If the best book I ever read about economics is Eat the Rich. It's tremendous book on capitalism, how it works, socialism, how it doesn't work. I didn't understand economics until I read Eat the Rich. And then I did. And it's P.J. O'Rourke who said, no, the market is just everybody's opinion. If you want to know what a brand new BMW costs, you're going to have 30,000 people with their opinions, and their opinions will triangulate. And you'll find out within a very, very thin sliver of what that particular automobile costs, because that's what everybody else is ready to pay for it. And the idea that something costs what people are ready to pay for was just like, well, once you understand that, then this whole socialist model goes away. You don't have a central economy or a planned economy. They don't make sense. They don't work. Because PJ said an object costs what people are willing to pay for it. That's it. That's the answer. What's this worth? It's worth what people are willing to pay. And once you get that, it's so profoundly interesting and so clear. And all of his a number of witty lines and memorable phrases you could just go into forever and ever and ever. So P.J. O'Rourke is the single greatest influence on me. I have to say the second biggest influence on me, and that, in some level, certainly a bigger influence on my life. P.J. O'Rourke was the biggest influence on my philosophy. And the biggest influence on my life and everything that went downstream from my life would probably be Jack Horkheimer at the Miami Planetarium, who made me crazy because he was a genuinely crazy guy, Jack. Some of you may remember Star Hustler on PBS stations. Bum, 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 playing the Tomita opening, arabesque, I think it was. And Jack was a nut. And Jack used to make me crazy. He used to make me bang my head against the wall crazy when I was 14, 15 years old. But Jack Horkheimer took a chance on me when I was 14. Gave me a chance to run a planetarium show after hours, which I did well, and then he made me a console operator at age 14. And at age 15, he let me write the first thing I ever wrote, which was a planetarium show about the constellation Delphinus the Dolphin, of all things. He said, I want a show about a constellation, and I said, all right. And I wrote a show about Delphinus, and I brought in all this stuff on cetaceans. I brought in everything about whales and dolphins and what they can do and how they can think, and it turned into something great. He let me do another one, and another one, and another one. Jack did something for me I'll never forget. He made me nuts. He made me nuts. But he was a good man, and one time when he gave me that first script, the opportunity to write the first script, I was 14 or 15, I guess 15, at the time. And we had a production coordinator there who was 28, and he didn't like me very much. I think he was kind of jealous of me in a way. Not going to mention his name, but not a really great guy. And I wrote the script and I delivered it to the production coordinator rather than Jack, because he wanted, just give it to me and I'll take it up to Jack. Okay. And I handed it to him, and he sits behind his desk and he gets out a red pen and he started crossing out sentences and changing words, and there was like a change in every single sentence of that 30-page script. Every sentence, something, punctuation, this word changed, that word changed. And as I'm watching him doing this, I'm getting more and more angry. And finally, when he was done with it, I said, you done? He said, yep. I said, come with me. What? I said, come with me. And I picked up the script and I walked into Horkheimer's office, and this other guy was trailing behind me. And I put this down on Horkheimer's desk, and I said, Jack, Art just did this, made changes to everything I did here. And if he wants to write the script, you can give it to him, but I want something like this original version. And Jack just looked down at it and looked up to this guy, and he said, that boy's a writer. Don't you touch a word of his. You don't touch a word of his. You leave it alone. That kid can write. I don't want a single mark on there. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. And Jack took a lot of chances with me. And I was very young, and I worked like an animal for no pay, next to no pay. And he knew it. But he gave me chances, and not just chances. I've said this before on the show too. Jack Horkheimer educated me to the idea of self-education. Jack would do a show. The first show I saw there was called Long Journey Beyond God, which was about the Apollo program. But it wasn't just about the Apollo program. It was about the journey of the hero. I learned about Joseph Campbell and the journey of the hero when I was 14 years old, listening to Bach in a dark room, looking up at pictures on the ceiling, hearing about the Gilgamesh and Humbaba and Lancelot and all of these characters. And then you would talk about transhumanism and the idea of like Homo lumens, the man of light. Oops, sorry about that. And I'm listening to classical music, and then his classic show was called Child of the Universe, which started out for walk-in music, had Lotte Lenya and Kurt Weill from 1930s Germany singing in German these dark songs. And you'd listen to these things for 10 or 15 minutes while people are coming in. You're listening to them speaking and singing in German. And then he starts the show with their music and talks about the Nazis. And he talks about how all of this evil from the Nazis occurred because people had lost their place in the universe, that science had displaced the earth from the center of the universe and displaced religion. And Lotte Lenya is singing a song called Lost Out Here in the Stars, and we're lost out here in the stars, little stars, big stars, blowing through the night. And he said, this is what happens when you lose your sense of place and pride and connection to humanity. And then the whole rest of the show was talking about how big the universe is and how long it's existed. And then when you realize you're just a speck, just a mote, he would show pictures that at first look like nebulae, but they're actually the hairs inside your ear, and these are your blood cells, and this is the rods of your eye, and these are your taste buds. And he said there's an entire universe inside every single one of you. and that we're right where we need to be. We're right where we're supposed to be. And closed it with kind of a hippy-dippy thing at the time, but it was extremely moving. It was a poem, recording of a poem called Desiderata, which is all about kind of your place in the universe, and don't let it get you down. Just be who you are and be okay with that. And that's not a planetarium show. I saw a lot of actual planetarium shows at other planetariums. You'd walk up to the planetarium at the New York Museum of Natural History in the 70s when I was working there with Jack, and you'd hear and over here we can see the constellation Orion with its two brightest stars, Arcturus, which is Betelgeuse, which is the upper right shoulder of the giant, and Rigel, which is down here, the blue star, is also a supergiant down in the foot. And you can see here, if you look very carefully, you'll be able to see the three stars that make up the famous belt of Orion here. And of course here, these three equally spaced stars which make up the sword of Orion. The three stars in the belt, of course, are called Al-Nitak, Al-Nilam, and Mintaka. They're all about 1,400 light years away. And then you get into a Jack Horkheimer show, and the first thing that happens is you sit down, and you've been listening for Long Journey of a Young God. Your walk-in music is Camelot. You're listening to show tunes from Broadway. You're listening to Camelot. Camelot, ba-dun-dun-dun. What the hell's this? The show starts, the lights go down, you're at Cape Kennedy, you're looking around, all around the edge, there's the launch pad, and it's T-minus 30 seconds, T-minus 30, and you hear the Apollo 11 countdown. Flashing lights, the room's spinning down, and there's the Apollo capsule going off into the distance of infinity, and then out comes a winged god, and if ever I should leave you. What? Well, he's making the case. Camelot was our golden age. Kennedy's administration was called Camelot. It was the Apollo program was an outgrowth of Kennedy and his idealism and all this other stuff. And so the Apollo program becomes Camelot for civilization. And then you go off into hundreds of light years out in space, and you got Leonard Nimoy, a little segment there where they find the Pioneer thing, and they figure out that human beings are, this, and they travel to the solar. It's incredible. You put all these pieces together, a journey of the hero, and you've got, what do you say to that? It's just genius. Oh, somebody over here says, Mr. Fard Mohammed. Hello, Mr. Fard Mohammed. I took a question earlier in the little comment thing. I just looked over and said, Horkheimer or Sagan, Bill? It's Horkheimer. Look, Sagan is brilliant, and Sagan is brilliant, and everybody knows about Sagan, so I'm going to go with Horkheimer because Sagan's so overexposed. Sagan popularized astronomy. Sagan took astronomy and made it accessible. But Jack Horkheimer took astronomy and made it romantic. And Sagan could never do that. I'm not saying Horkheimer is a bigger influence on the world than Sagan or should have been. Sagan is a genius. He's a giant. Had a big influence on me. But Horkheimer was a poet. He was, in fact, a jazz musician. That's how he got started. He was a jazz musician, had terrible lungs, and he moved from, I guess he was in Minneapolis or Minnesota, Wisconsin, maybe it was Wisconsin, moved down to South Florida because he thought he was going to die because his lungs were so bad. And he's a jazz musician. His name was Jack Foley, and a keyboard piano player. And Jack Foley moves down to Florida, expecting he's going to die within a year or two, gets a job as a writer in the Miami Planetarium, learned his astronomy, and brought a genuine brilliance to what would have normally been extremely dull stuff. He did another show that I loved called Buck Rogers Right On, and it was about Buck Rogers in the present day, comparing what Mars and all the other planets and our astronomical knowledge looked like in the 30s compared to what it looked like then, which was the 70s. And it was hilarious. He did Buck Rogers. He did all the voices, and so you see all the strips, on the dome on these giant slides. They're 30, 40 feet across. Buck Rogers strips from the 1930s, and the walk-in for that, which is the period again when people are coming in to sit down in the planetarium. The walk-in for Buck Rogers Right On was all of these radio shows. So there I am, 14 years old, and I'm listening to Allen's Alley. And I'm listening to Foghorn Leghorn, and I'm listening to all of this stuff. Who gets that kind of childhood? Who gets that kind of exposure? It just made me what I am, So he's a gigantic influence. So anyway, that's that. We're getting pretty close to time here. I'm going to try and keep these down to the 90 minutes, so I'm going to just look at a couple here.